Skill classification. Juggling can be classified as open because you are constantly responding to the position of the balls. The performer must act according to the actions of the skill, in this case where the balls are landing. Juggling is continuous as there should be no visible start and end, just an unbroken motion. Fine motor skills require greater control of the small muscles, such as hand-eye coordination skills. Successful juggling is proportionate to the performer's hand-eye coordination, peripheral vision, and visual reaction time. The juggler must maintain positional awareness of the balls while controlling the throw of another. Stages of learning. The participant will initially be in the cognitive or Gentile's first stage of learning. The participant will begin to understand the nature of juggling through sources that include observation, verbal feedback, and the learner's own sensory feedback that is generated through physical practice and will allow the learner to gauge factors such as timing of the throws, how high to throw the balls, and the catching sequence. By the end of the 5-week program, it can be expected that the learner will reach the associative or Gentile's second stage of learning. In this stage, the learner can understand how throwing and catching are interrelated and can adapt and modify these movements accordingly. It is reasonable to expect that after 5 weeks the learner has gained an understanding of the basic movements involved in juggling, and at this stage the learner should now be working on refining their skills. Constraints. Constraints may be biological that include motivation and cognitive factors. Environmental that may include gravity pulling down the juggling balls, or available light that may enhance peripheral vision or be a limitation to the learner. Task constraints may be relative to the goals or the rules in terms of what the overall movement should look like. Measures of performance. Subjective measures evaluate how continuous the juggling appears, how symmetrical is the movement, the shape of the skill, is it circular or mountain-like, and is the learner able to maintain a constant rhythm. Whereas objective measures may be the number of catches per attempt, number of balls juggled successfully, 1, 2 or 3, or the time spent juggling successfully. A retention test is conducted 48 hours after finishing the program, after the final session. This is done to determine whether the level of performance was due to actual learning or variables that produce temporary effects. A transfer test is a means of assessing the adaptability aspect of performance changes related to learning. In terms of juggling, this could be catching 2 balls between 2 people, each using one hand.
Each ball is tossed and caught in the opposite hand. Once the first ball is tossed and reached its peak height, the next ball is tossed. This process is repeated until the juggler decides to end the skill.
Sarah's goal for week 1 is to gain understanding of relying on proprioception when throwing and catching. Her weekly aim is to master throwing and catching relying on her peripheral vision and be able to throw and catch 2 balls with consistent timing. Sarah will start her 15-minute session with a short 5-minute warm-up comprising of throwing and catching 2 balls between 2 people. The throwing and catching essentially helps Sarah to get used to the weight of the ball, how long its flight time can be, and how quickly she has to act to catch the ball. The throwing will gradually require her to move around more and more, helping to build her heart rate and blood circulation in an attempt to help her focus on the complex task at hand. The first drill for week 1 is to throw 1 sock ball over your head from one hand to the other, relying on peripheral vision. Throughout the program, whenever the complexity of the skill increases, we invoke the simplification approach by substituting the standard juggling balls for sock balls. Using rolled up sock balls as a substitute for juggling balls decreases the weight, allowing a decreased reaction time required for Sarah to catch each sock ball. The second drill for week 1 is the same as the first, but completed using standard juggling balls. Using sock balls is an example of a simplification approach. It reduces the difficulty of the task by allowing the balls to be in the air for a longer period of time due to the lighter weight. Therefore, by reducing the difficulty of the task, it will reduce the overall attentional demands of the skill. This week, Sarah's drills increase in complexity, as she is required to begin to juggle 2 sock balls between 2 hands with adequate timing. She is then asked to juggle 2 standard balls in 2 hands with the same timing. These drills are aimed to improve Sarah's sequencing and timing skills, as juggling is a bimanual coordination skill that requires simultaneous use of 2 arms symmetrically with different spatial and temporal characteristics. Week 3 sees Sarah attempting to juggle 3 sock balls with adequate timing and technique for as long as possible. As the drills begin to move into the whole movement of juggling, Sarah will be able to watch a video of herself performing the selected drill. Diagnosing error through visual feedback will help Sarah see the difference in her performance compared to previous weeks. This will also act as a form of motivation for her to see her progress and the progress that still needs to be made. Sarah may then identify her own strengths and weaknesses instead of having them directly told to her. After one session using the sock balls, Sarah will then attempt to juggle 3 balls using the standard juggling balls. By week 4, Sarah now has a good idea of how to juggle 3 balls with 2 hands with adequate sequencing and timing. To increase the complexity of Sarah's training program, this week requires Sarah to juggle 2 balls in 1 hand. This will be her first attempt at transferring the basic knowledge that she has acquired in the first few weeks and transfer it into a slightly different skill. By doing this, we can assess if any learning has in fact occurred. Week 5 sees Sarah increasing the complexity of her juggling again by adding in a second person. Building from what she began with in week 4 by juggling 2 balls in 1 hand, she is now attempting to juggle 3 balls with a partner. This will be her transfer test. It also gives her a different perspective of an understanding of the appropriate timing and sequencing of standard juggling. The second drill, Drill 10, begins to target Sarah's ability to divert some of her attention to other tasks, such as answering basic questions while completing the basic juggling of 3 balls.
What day is it today, Sarah? The retention test, conducted 48 hours after the post-test was administered, showed that Sarah could reproduce the acquired skill after a period of disuse.
Good work.